Pero yun, so ito, napapasadahan ko lang. Wow, pang ilang slide pa lang ako, pero ilang oras na ako, no? Diba, 8:30 na. So the photograph as mediated meaning through its various framing. So basically, when I look, or at least when I explain photography, a huge part of it is that, or at least in most practices, photography is seen as a mediated meaning or a mediated experience. It's representation of the world. Sabihin nyo, ba't philosophy pinag-usapan natin? So, pasensya kayo, nanood kayo nito, no? Pero nevertheless, basta mamaya, it would make sense later. So ano, I'm just putting the foundational ideas on how I would contextualize contemporary photography. So, ang idea lang dito, photography is a mediated experience in the world, and as such, you would see photography, and you can even contextualize photography in different manners. You can look at photography as technology. You can look at photography as art. You mean yung last episode namin, it's photography as philosophy, or philosophy of photography. You can look at photography as commodity. So, I came from Canon. No? I used to head the camera group of Canon Marketing Philippines. And I was there for 11 or 12 years. And when part of my job was to commoditize photography, in the sense na not to devalue it, but to make it available. Similar to a commodity. Yung growth ng photography in the Philippines, nakita namin yan kasi we were part of it. We were selling cameras. Yung idea of content creation, photography, the salon system, may partly kasalanan ko yung bakit ngayon puro salon photography. Pero nevertheless, my job at that time was different. No? So nevertheless, yun. So part of photography is commodity. Na parang there is economic value to it. But the economic value doesn't necessarily mean naman, it doesn't take away the meaning of photography. You're just making it available to the rest of the world, or to the rest of the Philippines. Before, photography, well, again, as I mentioned a while ago, photography was a privileged experience. For you to, quote-unquote, participate in photography, you have to have, how much? 150,000 pesos para mag-photography? Do you have 150,000 ngayon? Ngayon ba para makapag-explore or participate in photography, kailangan mo 150,000? Hindi ah. Bili ka ng 8,000 pesos na cellphone, photographer ka na. And then I'm not trying to be dismissive ah. I'm just saying that the cost of photography as a commodity has gone down. That's why it became part of commoditization is democratization. It goes hand in hand. So a lot of people would hate the fact that there's economic value to photography. But then again, because you have commoditized it, it becomes available to everyone, to the masses. You have commoditized it. So therefore, people can get it, acquire it, buy it. They can experience it. They can pay to have that experience, and it doesn't necessarily mean the expensive experience. Again, a cellphone now is 5,000 pesos, 3,000 pesos cellphone, yung murang China phone. And you can do photography using a 3,000 or 2,000 peso phone. Because it was commoditized. So part of that dynamic of commoditizing is also making it available. So you have to understand that. Tapos you have to also think of photography as participation. In the sense, photography is a community. It's not just one photographer in the entire Philippines, diba? Syempre may individual styles tayo, individual ideas, individual concepts, individual processes, individual tendencies, motivations, inspirations, different fields of expertise. But then again, since we are all photographers, or at least we're engaging in photography, we are participants in a community of photographers, or at least participants in human society, in Philippine society through photography. Yun din. Kasi you can think of the photography community na medyo maliit na circle, but you can think of photography as the entire population of the Philippines. Everyone has a cell phone. Hello. You have to understand that photography, kaya nga sabi ko is, I started with the meme. Because the fact is, we have to get out of that traditional mindset of photography being a privileged experience. Part of it probably still is. And that will not go away. Because there's still the gallery system, there's still money involved in doing photography, there's capital, diba? to get access to learning, well, this is free. Diba? Yung talk na to. But then again, you have to have a cell phone, or you have to have a monitor, or you have to have internet for you to access this talk, diba? So there's still economic part pa rin siya. So yun, so yun yung, pero in a way, we have to understand that photography is a communal experience now. Hindi lang siya individual. It's participation. The entire Philippines is participating in photography. Hindi lang yung mga photographers. Photography has ceased to be a domain of photographers. Photography has ceased to be an experience of photographers. Photography is an experience of everyone. So yun, it's the domain of human experience na nga eh. Yung sasabi ko kanina. Kaya siya phenomenology na nga eh. So yun. So makikita mo may ibang framing. So minsan, a teacher would use photography in context of visual culture, like an advertiser or a cultural studies na class, or you would probably later will see photography as an expression of identity, like yung mga LGBTQ plus experience. How do they show their identity? Not through talking, probably yes, but part of it is through photography. They express themselves, and they also, aside from expressing themselves, they also want to be represented, their identity to be represented in photography. Kaya nga may issue, diba, yung photo world, tapos si Canon, diba, nagkaroon ng issue about gender representation, and that's also going to be discussed. I mean, ano tayo? I mean, no, there is no safe place. So, we are teachers, we are students of photography. So, everything is, no holds barred tayo. Pero syempre, hindi naman tayo mag-instigate ng, ng away. We're just going to be conscious. We just have to be conscious of where we find photography. And in a way, currently what we're saying is, it's everywhere. So let's try to break it down. So yan. So kaso nabanggit ko naman to kanina na in a way, what I'm trying to point at is that photography, since it has ceased to be the domain of privilege, or a domain of solely photographers, it has ceased to be that. Now, photography is actually a site of human experience. Kaya sabi ko rin kanina, it's similar to philosophy. Probably, hindi mo siya sabihin na, nag-iisip ka about naiinis ka, or galit ka, or masaya ka. Probably, you're not thinking that as philosophy, but that is partly philosophy. I mean, whatever the way you think about in your life, I'm sure part of it is philosophy, because you are trying to philosophize. Kaya nga hindi rin siya definite. Hindi siya fixed. Because, so what is philosophy? So it's the same kind of question that we have been asking about photography. So what is philosophy? What is photography? In a way, similar yung questions natin, kasi we cannot fix it. We cannot put it na hindi natin siya pwede ikahon. It's a site, or it's in the domain of human experience. There's no part in our human lives that has not been touched by photography and philosophy, diba? So yun. So kaya yun. And the reason I'm putting Philippine here is to make a distinction between the Philippine photography experience, or the experience of Philippine photography, as compared to an experience of a Western worldview of photography. So may explain natin yan siguro. So yun. So part of it is Philippine photography is a framework of discourse. Siguro I'll explain this, but this is a bit more academic. So sabi ko nga sa inyo, willing kayo mag-stay ng 3 hours. No? Kumura yung lecture class. No? Pero mambala kayo, you can go naman. May i-record ko naman to. Pero if you need to eat, or you need to go, okay lang naman. So sanay na ako mag-record mag-isa. Pero nevertheless, so yun. So Philippine photography is a framework of discourse. So in a way, this is a bit academic in the sense that in BNILD, part of our task, actually one of our goals, is to be able to define, or at least gesture at, what is Philippine photography? Photography has been in the Philippines for 182 years. And yet, no one has defined what is Philippine photography. Diba, ang weird. Bakit may Philippine literature, pero ba't walang Philippine photography? But my definition of Philippine literature or Philippine history or Philippine whatever, pero walang Philippine photography. Almost 2 centuries na yan nasa Pilipinas. Bakit wala? Kasi nga, it's always moving, it's fluid. And part of that difficulty is the challenging fact that it's fluid. Kaya ang hirap siyang i-define. But nevertheless, it shouldn't stop anyone to gesture at it. Kung hindi mo man ma-fix siya, maikahon, which is, you shouldn't be able to do that. Well, in the first place, you shouldn't. And then, number two, you will not be able to. It's not just about shouldn't, but also you cannot. So because it's fluid. Kaya ngayon, part of our task, one of our goals in Benino is that since kami lang naman ang merong AB photography program in the Philippines, I think, meron na yata isa. Pero in a way, as one, siguro as one of the dedicated programs in the Philippines na AB photography, one of our tasks is really that, na let's have a discourse that is specific to Philippine photography. Let's try to define it despite of the difficulties. Teachers tayo kami. Practitioners kami. So dapat meron na mga may idea, meron kami yung paghuhugutan of that definition. No? And in a way, we're not doing it alone. The reason that I have Photography Chismis because I'm trying to get also feedback from the market. I'm not market, from the community. So when I invite people sa Photography Chismis podcast, yung isa pag-uusapan niya pornography. Yung isa pag-uusapan niya is, yung isa last time philosophy. Yung susunod, ano ba yung isa? Psychology. Kaya sinasabi natin na photography, there's no part of our human experience that has not been touched by photography. Psychology, philosophy, pornography, history, art making, even food, commerce, and some of those will be discussed. Hindi discuss, intro pa lang pala to, nakakaisat kalahating oras na, intro lang pala to. Pero nevertheless, yun. So parang idea dito is, kaya in-specify ko yung concept of Philippine photography. Kasi yung Philippine, very important yan. Na parang how is it different? Why is it not just photography? Because we're trying to find an identity. Yun yung goal din namin. Let's ask. At least siguro kung hindi namin mahanap, let's start with the question, is there such thing as Philippine photography? And that's part of the goal of Photography Chismis as well. Kaya mapapansin nyo, I don't use Western sources. I always invite Filipinos, number one. And then number two, when I write my writings or my theory, syempre yung theory, syempre, we have to borrow from other thinkers or theorists in philosophy na hindi not necessarily Philippines. But we have to apply it in our Philippine human experience. Yun yung important doon. So yun. So, yan. Kaya part of it is sinasabi natin ng various framing kasi, again, there is a plurality of how we can talk about photography. There's so much ways. There is so many ways how we can quote-unquote define or frame or structure how we discuss photography. There's so many ways. And then, tangential reference, meaning in history, for example, part of the reason that you have history books right now is that they were able to find photographs of the past. Diba? Part of our history were written because of photographs. In the first place, can you, lalo na kung walang maganda sa Pilipinas kasi may oral tradition. That's one of the strengths of the Philippines. We have oral tradition. So we can write it down and then it becomes text. Pero part of our history is actually photographs. A huge part of it. When we see EDSA Revolution. Ako, di naman ako pinanganak nung EDSA Revolution. Well, pinanganak 3 years old pala ako nun. But then again, my understanding of EDSA Revolution, which we are celebrating right now, is partly through text, what I've read in books, but what I've seen in books. Iba ang experience of history through photographs din. You can read about it. Hindi siya opposition. We're saying na magkatulong lagi ang text. History and in relation to textual history, oral history, and visual history. That's why we value artifacts. We value photographs, we value artifacts. Sword, weaving, because there's something phenomenological about having an evidence, an artifact. It's different. Parts of that, it's part of that experience of creating history or writing history or experiencing history. So yun. So kaya yun, in the sense, hindi naman ang history not necessarily about photography, but part of that experience or field of study, tangentially, it references photographs. Like kanina, sabi natin, how has been a Filipino represented in our culture in the Philippines? Kung wala yung photograph kanina, our mindset of a traditional Filipino woman would be, diba? I mean, Maria Clara. Diba? But then again, when you see a picture like yung Sangli woman, and then suddenly, meron din palang ibang quote-unquote, hindi fixed. Hindi fixed ang konsepto ng pagiging Pilipina. Diba? Kahit sabihin natin na, pati kasi ano yun eh, kasi pokpok. Yun, political yun eh. Tsaka hindi mo naman pwedeng, ano yun eh, ano yun, you're trying to be, in a way parang ad hominem yun. Tinitiran mo yung babae na yun because of the work. But regardless, that photograph proves the existence of such a type of woman. So, tanggalin mo yung value judgment of the work or morality. Regardless, that kind of Filipina existed. And you were not able to get that reality or that understanding through text. There was nothing written about it. And then suddenly, John Silva in 1985 saw a photograph of a woman in 1875 na ganun. Suddenly, history that didn't exist, suddenly, there's a part of history that you saw. So that's not photography, that's history making or history writing. But then again, it tangentially references from a photograph. So that also affects gender studies, ideas about identity, diba? Ideas about work or careers, even roles. Ang daming bit-bit na ideas, konsepto, and reality. Yung photograph na nahanap ni John. Na wala sa libro. Kaya kahit sabihin natin na history is not photography, yes, I know. Pero that example that we gave a while ago, that just proves that part of our understanding of history are coming from photographs. Kasi hindi ka naman pwede bumalik sa history. I mean, no, may time capsule ka ba, diba? Wala naman, diba? So yun, kaya yung sabi natin na part of our understanding of photography can also come from tangential reference. Ibig sabihin tangent, parang nabanggit or part of it, yun yung naka-reference siya. And then yung intersectional understanding is that, for example, when we talk about art, intersectionally, we also talk about politics. Intersectionally, we talk about economics. And intersectionally, we talk about photography. When we talk about mass media, tangentially, we're talking about text. But intersectionally, we also talk about photographs. When we talk about religion, images. Well, kasi wala masyadong religious photos eh. Medyo yun yung interesting, walang religious photos, diba? Kadalasan still religious paintings, diba? Or illustrations. Walang religious photos. Wala ka namang photograph ni Jesus. Wala ka namang photograph ni Saint Peter. Diba? Wala ka namang photograph ni Buddha. All of those are renderings, meaning drawing or, diba? So yun yung medyo different, diba? So, kaya yung religion medyo, ano pa siya, in a way, tangential pa siya. Hindi pa siya intersectional. Yung mga intersectional is, for example, forensic science. Ayan, intersectional ah. When you do investigation, scientific studies, part of the methodology is photography. You're not going to use photography in forensic science as art. But then again, the presence of photography in forensic science just proves that our understanding of what is evidentiary or what is an evidence, what is truth, what is factual, what is empirical, what is measurable, what is identifiable, all of those things that we associate with science na prove na may hypothesis ka tapos ipo-prove mo through experiments or other methodologies, in a way, in science, the scientific method is that you have an hypothesis and you prove it. part of the proof is diba, experiments, research. But a lot of what we think is scientific evidence are photographs. For example, birding, avian photography. The existence of an extinct animal, when a photograph mo, it's a proof that it still exists. It's not extinct. When you do forensic science, the proof on a crime, in a crime, is not just the investigation. Part of the investigation is looking through photographs. So intersectional siya. So the concept of what is an evidence that you need to do in science, part of that intersectionally is similar to how we look at photographs. Photographs are, kadalasan, we think of photographs are evidences. It's quote-unquote factual. I mean, part of it. Actually, kung sa class ko to, maraming question, totoo ba talaga ang photograph? Pero nevertheless, since ano naman to, introductory. Pero 8:51 na, no? Nag-i-enjoy yung magdaldal. Pero nevertheless yun, pasensya na. So yun, so yung sabi natin yung difference ng various framing, paano natin siya pag-uusapan, tangential reference na parang, how does this relate to, ano, diba? To history or religion, gender studies, cultural studies, and then intersectional understanding like science, diba? Or territorial. Yeah, sabihin natin, paano natin napoprove na in-invade na tayo ng China? We have photographs. And I'll give us an example also. So even yun, territorial integrity, how we see territory, how we see encroachment, it's partly defined by our understanding of photography. Because when we see boats, ships, airplanes na nasa Spratlys, na pinotograph ng Air Force at Navy, that is irrevocable proof that they are encroaching in our territory. Sabihin mo ba, hindi photograph lang, hindi naman totoo yan. You wouldn't say that. That's stupid, di ba? Diba? Kaya yun sabi natin na even our concept of those things na outside art, our concept of politics is intersectionally related to photography. May another example. And then, at the last, in the end, probably, in trying to define Philippine photography, part of it, or simultaneous to it, is probably we can also define what is Filipino. Kasi what is Filipino in the first place? If you're a foreigner and you've been staying in the Philippines for how long? 20 years. Are you a foreigner or are you a Filipino? Diba? Yung mga puti na nasa Bacolod na nagbibisaya, nag-iilonggo, Filipino na ba sila or foreigner pa rin sila? So, diba? O what about naman yung mga Pilipino na lumabas ng countries? Na 20 years, 30 years abroad, Filipino ba sila? Dito sila pinanganak, pero a huge part of their lives are not here. Probably, baka hindi na nga sila bumalik. Yung iba, Filipino pa rin ba sila? Kabayan. Ano maging kabayan? Hindi naman sila dito lumaki. Hindi naman sila dito tumanda. Wala naman silang pag-aari dito. Siguro meron kasi papadala silang pera. Filipino pa rin ba yun? Kaya yun yung mga questions of Filipino identity. And in the discussion of Philippine photography, baka partly masasagutin partly yung what is Filipino. Kasi again, photographs are tangential. It can point towards a certain reality that we don't necessarily, that is not obvious to us. Diba? So yun. So yun yung hopefully makatulong yun. Ay, sinabi ko na to. Ito, Philippine photography site of human experience. And, yan. Sabi ko na a huge part of this lecture, which I think medyo mahaba-haba pa to. So, nasa inyo kung alis na kayo o hindi. Pero nag-enjoy ako. Recorded naman. Ayoko na ulitin to. So, nevertheless, the reason I'm also trying to explain that goal of what we want to do in our goal to define Philippine photography, or at least gesture towards it, of what is Philippine photography. Part of it is I'm also doing individually in Photography Chismis. Aside from my task or my job or our job in Binil as faculty, part of this advocacy that I have is also pointing to this. Kaya pag pumunta ka sa page ng Photography Chismis, laging ginagamit yung term na discourse. Ano ba yung discourse? Di ba pang teacher lang yan? Not necessarily. Siguro, yung term na discourse pang teacher, pang estudyante, or pang school, or pang politics. But in a way, you'd be surprised that discourse is something more general. So what do we mean by that? Yan.